Without further ado, let me just introduce Aakash, who, as you all know, is the CEO of Quest Alliance, which is serving more than 500,000 young Indians every year. And just 15 years ago, he was a 23-year-old who came to IYF, I understand, at a conference in Egypt. And when you were speaking as a young person at a USAID conference, and IYF was looking for a country director, and Aakash raised his hand. But before we get to that story, I always like to begin with just learning a little bit more about you, Aakash, where you grew up, and what compelled you as a young person to even become engaged in the issues of youth development and education.
Sure. Thank you so much. And it's really a pleasure to be here and have the opportunity to share a little bit about my experience. I can start, like Susan said, a little bit about myself. I grew up in Ahmedabad, which is a small town where Gandhiji started his independence movement. So obviously, as a young kid growing up in Ahmedabad, you're doing projects on Gandhi. Gandhi is a big part of culture and values that you learn. So I grew up there in Ahmedabad. I was not a very good student, so repeated my ninth grade, which was which was one of my, I think, pivotal moments in my life, where sort of repeating a class and having to stay back in the same school and see what it means to sort of receive failure in a hostile boys school environment, and yet have the compassion of the teachers, the principals, etc. So I think that was one of my important experiences, life experiences. I think I also as a result of failing my ninth, I got a chance to explore new parts of myself, which I wasn't in touch with. Things like graphic design, basketball, and other things, which really allowed me to be more than a failed learner. And I think growing up, I wanted to be a chef, but my mother, who is a PhD in management, said, how can my kid become a chef and make food? He needs to be a little more educated. So she made sure I went to graduate school or undergraduate school studying economics and statistics. That's where I really got into volunteer work as a young facilitator, peer educator, talking to young people about social responsibility, entrepreneurship, cultural understanding. And I think that experience with a global youth organization called ISEC was my sort of stepping stone into youth work, where I got a chance to spend time in different countries at a young age, in South Africa, in Japan, in Germany, spending time and living in youth hostels, getting sort of insights about young people from all over the world. So that was addictive, to be also the bridge between businesses and people who want to do good, and really building the bridge with young people. So I kind of got the bug got on at that time, I think, when I was probably 18 or 19.
Well, that's a great story, and from going from a struggling learner, as you described yourself, to somebody who really understood the importance of learning and volunteering and engaging. And love the story about your mother as well. So then you're at this conference, and obviously you caught the ear, I'm sure, of many people, but IYF in particular. And they offer you this opportunity to run the USA 3-year program and be a country director at the young age of 23. And that must have been rather daunting. And you mentioned in the interview we did with you over the summer that you thought you'd have that kind of opportunity in your 40s, but to have it at such a young age, can you share with us, and particularly for we have some of our emerging leaders on the line here, what was that like, and what really what made you embrace this opportunity and frankly take some risks?
Yeah. No, I remember, distinctly the time in the Library of Alexandria in Egypt, which was quite an amazing venue, and being amongst a lot of people who were passionate about youth development. I was definitely a little disturbed with the fact that there were mostly old, wise men around the table, and less opportunity for young people to be on the table. And I think expressing that dissent and sharing it in a space like that definitely was, I think, an important, a courageous, move to share that we need more young people on the table to have these conversations with, rather than speaking to young people, because I think youth are innovators, and we can't really look at them only as people we are solving for, but they are sort of problem solvers as well. And I think that sort of experience and having, it was kind of a dream job in a sense. What the role was to really bring different actors together and build a sort of alliance which was not the norm back then. So getting that opportunity, but more than opportunity, I think just the dream job that I would have not thought that I would get at that age in my career. And I was really wide-eyed when the first time I came to Baltimore, and just went through the different floors in the office and got a chance to look at so much inspiring content, a lot of inspiring literature about youth development. And I was like, this is the destination I was looking for as someone, as an 18-year-old. I felt like I had arrived in life and in my career. And I think that was really quite a powerful moment, I think, to experience that. Of course, yeah, I mean, it didn't feel that daunting. It felt quite actually energizing, and it felt like I had a mission and all of that. So yeah, I mean, the daunting work, I guess, started after the work started, but my overall feeling was really, really um um I think privileged. I felt very privileged to have had that kind of an opportunity. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's where I was at. Yeah.
You hear that in your voice. It's almost as if you were there yesterday. I can picture you, and I'm sure many, Bill and others, can picture you walking in the Baltimore office and that energy, which, again, IYF being the pioneering organization in positive youth development. Now, thankfully, many organizations around the world and donors are focused on youth development, but you all were really breaking some unbelievable ground back then. So now I'm going to turn to, and we are going to turn to all of you in a session to ask questions. So just a few more from me as pulling the story out of Akash. Talk to us a little bit about what it was like during that 3-year program. I mean, so you went from completely energized, huge opportunity, but it was a lot of work. We all know implementing programs is problem solving on a daily basis. So we'd just love to hear what that was like in building the team, and then your decision, really with IYF as the program was coming to an end, not to just let it end and to really incubate the idea and the work you were doing and IYF supporting on these issues, so that you could actually register locally. And I understand you all took a 50% pay cut in order to actually start make this work in early years. But talk to us about what happened during that 3-year period. Why did you think you could do this? And what was the role IYF played in order to help you really become a local, independent, now a powerhouse organization?
Sure, thank you. I think the first 3 years definitely were a lot of learning. I think one, of course, the kind of partners we had in India in the first 3, 4 partners were fairly powerful organizations, and were largely looking at IYF as a funding organization, whereas we wanted to go beyond funding to really build knowledge, to build networks, to unlock capital from the various funding organizations as well. And of course, that external reality that, how do we really prioritize education technology, which can help organizations scale their work, especially around 21st century skills, was a clear priority that we had identified. And while I was in India, 1 or 2 people, I think there was a very strong team in Baltimore, which was really the guiding light in terms of providing the sort of technical direction and being able to bring in the expertise in instructional design in various technical aspects. And of course, there were cultural challenges with that process as well, to work remotely, to sort of not being able to align on the level of details that were needed. I obviously was new to the USAID understanding of what it means to operate in multiple countries, and the complexity from a compliance perspective as well. I remember Yovona, calling me out for a wrong purchase I had done on a modem that I shouldn't have bought from the project money. And I think those are, important experiences that also help you understand what it means to operate in a global organization. So whether it was compliance, whether it was cultural understanding, whether it was sort of the content and the complexity that goes with the content of the work that we were trying to do. So yeah, I think those were all fairly significant challenges in the first 3 years because USAID had high expectations in terms of program outcomes, but we were also trying to invest in innovation and not necessarily only say that we need to scale these innovations. So how do we balance kind of building new ideas, because that is sort of one of the core ideas we had with Quest, that how can we use technology in innovative ways to solve problems around young people transitioning into the workforce. And I think I think the good part about that experience, I remember, was that I could really, at some point be able to pick up the phone and, call a few people in the IYF office and really express my dissonance and say when I was annoyed with there not being a good knowledge management system, or, how people are not listening to me and are coming in my way. And I think sort of that feeling that I was still in a cage and being able to say that, I really need to be let out. So just do something and let me be. And I was on the verge of quitting as well because of all these complexities that I mentioned, whether it's culture, it's compliance, it's the content as well. But I think when I was actually let out of the cage of all of these 3 dimensions, of course, with a sensitivity that we need to be aware that these are complex sort of aspects of working in a global organization. I had to learn that, and then assure that I would not, cross the boundaries that are needed. One of so Yeah, I think that's what I remember in the sort of 3 years of trying to sort of balance these things, work with a small team. Yeah, I forgot your question, so I'll just
Well, then you went on. So the program comes to an end, and I just want to welcome Ron Beba, our vice chair of the board. We are recording, so you can listen to the first part as well on Ron. But we're having a discussion, and we'll turn it over to you. So the 3-year USAID IYF program comes to an end.
Yeah.
We've all faced this in our different countries and programs we work on.
Yeah.
How did then that happen between IYF and Quest, and you ultimately said, okay, we want to incubate, we want to take this to the next level? As I mentioned, you all took pay cuts, but you had to build a team. You had so much you had to do, as you were just referring. I mean, compliance definitely makes you feel like you're in a cage, but then you're out of the cage and you're like, oh my gosh, all of a sudden you have all this responsibility. How did you deal with this? You were 26 years old at the time. Your team was really small, and this trajectory, and then maybe take it to then talk about that trajectory to where you are today, and share maybe some of the lessons from that period.
Sure. I think the good part was that, USAID was keen that we continue beyond 3 years. It's just that they didn't have the money to also invest, but they had the sort of moral support at that time to say we have the blessings of USAID to want to make sure that this goes beyond the 3 years of the project. So obviously that was going. That was an intent that USAID had expressed. Now, how do we take that? And obviously, Bill is here, and I think he was maybe his belief that local organizations need to be supported. At the same time, there wasn't much legacy of an IYF office becoming a local organization. So I think there was some sort of transition work at that stage to internally align on whether this is a go or no go. So I think that's something that definitely would have hopefully not given sleepless nights, but definitely did some amount of back and forth on that from what I remember. I think at that point, it was also the confidence that was placed on our small team saying, we'll do this if you want to really take this on. We are not going to set up a new team. So we need some commitment from the team locally to say, we really want to do this. We will, see through some of the transitions. And I think one thing that really helped was that because we had sort of USAID level compliance in our DNA, the ability to set up a new entity and have the credible policies, procedures, etc., was already gave us a head start. So that's also, I think, thanks to Yvonne and Sam, that we actually were able to have that foundation to build, because a new entity really needs that kind of sort of springboard for being able to do this. So that definitely helped, I think, as we were on our journey to registering. I remember Awais telling me, he had to fight battles about me wanting to hire a cook for our office, because that was something we said we really want, home cooked food, or food is a big part of our culture. We had our offices in, a residential neighborhood. So there were some of such sort of ideas which were tolerated and not, were not put down in the journey. So I think those little things definitely helped express our youthfulness. And at the same time, given that we were all 26, 27 years old, I think the risk of, taking pay cuts and seeing where we would go, it felt right, because, it was only 3 years, and we felt that a lot of good foundation, credibility had been built because of our work in the first 3 years, and so it felt right that we should, see where this goes. There's obviously commitment phobia in like in most young people. You don't want to say I'm in this for 10 years, and you try to sort of see 2 years, 3 years, we'll see how it goes. But I think at that stage, the idea was that let's give something a decade, let's give something 10 years, let's see where that goes, if one is able to give an idea a good sort of 10-year runway. And obviously that didn't happen at in the first 3 years. It perhaps happened at the fourth or fifth year, where we felt like we can give this 10 years. So I think that was an important moment where while we were all young people trying to start off, we had that legacy, we had that sort of sophistication even in our raw way of being and doing things. So I think that was definitely a good sort of springboard that allowed us to take the risks that are important in that stage. Yeah, I think
today then, Akash, clearly that 10 years, sort of, we'll see how this works out. It worked out with a lot of hard work. I'm sure sweat makes some tears and lots of joy. But you clearly had something that you also were developing and innovating and staying ahead of the curve. There was a demand side. And you talk about Accenture coming in as one of your key early investors, if you will. And now, obviously, if you can share sort of what the impact of the pandemic and then where you are today. And, congratulations again on the Mackenzie Scott Award, as my friends who've said, who have been granted those awards. It's like the fairy godmother bringing pixie dust onto an organization because they see just something that could, wow, this is really important. So take us to today. And then I'm just going to open it up if folks can think about questions or points, comments they want to make, and just raise your hand. So over to you, Akash.
Yeah, I think the important part of our story and where we are today, and I'll come to that, I think was and I say it with all authenticity, that sort of the IYF DNA of believing in partnerships, believing in innovation and locally led solutions. I think that transfer, and of course being credible and compliant, and being obsessed with good communication as important elements of the DNA that got passed on. I think a core part of who we are today is also about, like you said, being more future forward, being more innovation oriented, and say investing in building digital products that we started back in 2006, 2007, when there was no internet with that kind of bandwidth and penetration. And how do you also innovate for offline solutions? How do you still use digital to not just train learners, but also digital tools becoming a tool for self-reflection, a tool for learning anytime, anywhere? Those were things that were, back in 2006, 7, not the norm. So I think that DNA again sort of continued, where we went from things like early stage digital products to building more robust platforms or more robust technologies that work offline. So I think that was an important element to where we are, and to where we are today, where we work with, like you mentioned, about 500,000 young people across 5,000 classrooms and vocational training institutes around India, focusing on still bringing 21st century skills in partnership with state governments. We work with about 8 different state governments to mainstream 21st century skills in their curriculum. We work with the central ministry, which is the Ministry of Skills and Entrepreneurship, to design the curriculum framework, to integrate technology solutions in what they do. And we are a team of about 350 people around the country, and we have about an operating budget of about $8 million right now, and spread in about 7-8 different geographies. So it's quite a wide spread now, and hopefully also the depth is something that we are fighting. I think there's some dissonance with depth and scale as we are trying to balance these two, which is a struggle right now. I think the Mackenzie Scott money definitely allows us to bring in more flexibility in not the rigidity of deliverables, but really being able to invest in areas that we care about without worrying whether we'll get donor approvals for that or not, because we can invest. But the mindsets are still changing. It's only been less than a year, so people are still focused on the donor deliverable, as opposed to saying we'll invest money in innovations and not worry whether that's approval friendly or not. So those are struggles right now. As the complexity has increased, our capability to manage that complexity with the flexible funding is definitely going to hopefully get better. We are going to get better at that. Yeah, we are building the Quest Learning Observatory, which is really a physical space, which is a future sensing space that can allow us to be more experimental, more future oriented. So almost like a sort of mini college university idea of how do we keep that spirit of innovation alive. So yeah, that's a quick sort of picture of that state.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for walking us through your journey and with the challenges today. As you highlighted, the scale and depth issue is something I think all of us, we every day are talking about. How do we reach scale, but also really have that impact that transforms lives? As well as the gift of flexible funding and unrestricted, but it's a mind shift change as well for organizations. And I saw Eric, our digital director, put in the chat, you emphasized it was great to sort of have all of a sudden USAID compliance, but then you also have to shift that thinking, right? As you're working in different environments. So with that, why don't I open it up and maybe first to our board members for questions or comments you have. Please, Leonard.
Thanks, Akash. That was really interesting, and congratulations to you and to Quest Alliance. I just wanted to get to that the depth versus scale question that you brought up. You work in a number of different states in India. You have a number of different programs. Could you just talk to us a bit about what is your process for deciding, do we start a new program or do we start working in a new location? What are the factors that you take into account in looking at expanding, let's say, into a new area? Thanks.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's an ongoing I think struggle to do it with the right sort of metrics in mind. I think initially it was like we were quite donor driven initially, saying if some donors want to work in a geography that we are not present in, we would sort of go set up shop in that geography, and then that would mean that we would need to look for more donors, and sort of that vicious cycle kind of perpetuated, and that did not allow us to be as strategic. So I think in the last 3 to 5 years, what we have done is identified 6 or 7 focus geographies based on the government interest and alignment with our strategic plan that we have, being able to look at what is the local partner ecosystem in those states, whether we will have access to good talent in those states, or we already have teams in those states, and where we can operate at a certain scale in those states where we can co-create, co-design with government, with partners, and so on. So I think and of course funding is a factor, but it's not in the top three things that we would consider now, if and say that we can proactively raise that money if we have a concrete plan. So it's moved to sort of government alignment, partner alignment, and team alignment or the team capabilities as the core sort of indicators. Contextualization still is a journey, because in India one state is very different from another, and therefore one size fits all is not very easy to pull off. We need to look at what are the cultural factors in a particular state. We need to look at, therefore, what would be our learning objectives or our intent of being in that state. And those nuances, I think, are still work in progress. I would say we haven't fully cracked that piece.
Thank you. That's really interesting to hear the criteria, and I think as all organizations, right, there's a lot of nuance there, as you just described, right? So thank you for that. Alejandro, over to you. Oh, I think you're on mute, Alejandro. Yeah, there we go. Oh, nope, we can't hear you, Alejandro. Can you hear us?
Okay. Can
There
you hear me
we
now?
Yes.
I couldn't find it on. Sorry. Thank you so much, Akash. I can relate with your story on so many levels, and it's really exciting to hear it. What I find like super impressive, and I want to learn more about, is like, how did you transform that like youthful energy and vision to sustainable scale and the scale and impact that you have right now? Because that's something really strange to see. You see a lot of projects beginning, but really few maturing to what you have built. So which were the main inflection points of growth in this journey, and what decisions led you to those inflection points? Thank you.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I think 2-3 that come to mind. One was definitely when we were registering independently and trying to build the organization from different perspectives that we already spoke about. I think the second one again was when a major project which we had in actually when we were actually registering independently, to actually have a funder like Accenture who joined us and came forward even though we were new, and really saying we will support your we will support you over a 3 to 5 year period. Obviously not with that commitment, but with the intent saying we will. So I think having that initial transition from IYF to Accenture was definitely one big sort of shift and important milestone for us to secure that kind of a partnership. And Accenture came actually on their own to fund us after reading about us, and again having search engine optimization where we showed up back in 2009 in organizations was definitely thanks to IYF's investment in communication that it had made. So I would say that was one inflection point. I think the second one was in 2013-14 when we were again facing a major project funding cut, and we said that how much do we want to exist project to project and donor to donor, versus can we have a slightly more programmatic thought process where multiple sort of donors can support one larger intent of delivering impact. And that's where I think we sort of shifted our own mindset from a project based operating model to a little more program based operating model. And what that means is that we could plan a little more long term. We could say, we put our first strategic plan in place for 3 years or 3 to 4 years, which really allowed us to go beyond sort of the project to project existence. And then I would say the other sort of inflection point, I mean, there have been many, but if I have to say, the other one would be when we perhaps decided to really go after scale, because there was a lot of resistance from the internal teams to say, we really like the depth that we are doing, but there was a tension between, do you really want to grow or do you want to stay? So I think being able to spend a year and a half in say 2018 just crafting one mission statement, which really brought the team and all the debates, all the tensions alive without feeling like those need to get resolved, in a week or in 2 weeks, but keep that tension alive with more people to really ask existential questions, and let that process also help you sort of come to that clarity. Else, sometimes mission statements you want to, craft in 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. And I think it just investing that time, in hindsight, I feel was an important sort of point where you could sort of transform as a whole system rather than feeling like, sort of 10 people have come together and made this decision. So yeah, I would say those were a few that come to mind. I think more recently, really close associate and the COO actually passed away. And I think that also was an important inflection point. Someone who had been with us for 15 years from the start, he, all of a sudden, passed away. And I think that made me sort of question this idea of, sometimes you tend to look at leadership or leaders as just one person, that one other person, versus making you believe that it need not just be the one, there can be many more, and therefore it's a leadership and not leader who is able to really so you don't try to replace a person, you try to bring many more people together to transform the whole system. And I think that was an important inflection point for me personally as well, to not search for that one person who will come and anyway, yeah. So that I would say was another important inflection point in the journey.
So many important points you made there. I know many of us are taking notes. So in the interest of time, why don't I turn to Stephen, Evie, and Umran all to ask your questions, and I'll try and make sure we cover all that in your answers, Akash. So first over to you, Stephen.
Thanks, Susan. Just such a fantastic story and mission of what you're doing. I must imagine just super exciting to have the grant from Mackenzie Scott's Foundation. How do you think about that enabling either new things that you want to be able to do, or reinforcing, whether it's geographic expansion or other sorts of new programs that you want to be able to power for Quest Alliance?
Sure.
Right. And maybe, well, but Evie, why don't you ask yours as well, so we make sure we get everyone's questions, and we'll do another round of questions too. Go ahead, Evie.
Sure. Greetings, everybody. I have a particular question on as I get the opportunity to lead our Learning Differences program. You said you referred to your 9th grade year as failure, and I'm so curious as to what conditions led to that? And particularly, do you believe most of those were individual or physiological, or if they were like systemic or environmental? So we can get a better understanding of that. Thank you.
Thanks. And yeah, we're excited about launching this new program with the Oak Foundation. And Omran, over to you.
Yeah, hi. Thank you for the introductions and all that. So I was wondering the impact in terms of diversity, reaching out to girls and boys, or, young women and men. Do you have some statistics or some goals there?
Sure. Yeah. So I think on the Mackenzie Scott question, I mean, I generally in jest tend to say that, one is the quality of sleep is definitely better if I leave everything, aside. It's just that you have a lot more mental peace and well-being, and sometimes that itself is really important to be able to do what we do well and better. The sort of the well-being that, or the safety net that you feel will help just tide through a bad time. I think it's important to also recognize that the opportunity that the grant creates in terms of being able to invest in areas that we felt were not typically easy to get money for, and typically funders, at least that we've worked with, we've been lucky to have funders like people like Google or Fossil, who really invested in the innovation engine, which means that, no questions asked, develop new ideas, etc. But our ability to innovate is where I see more money going because of this investment. I would say also people and culture is definitely another area where I would see this money being invested to be able to grow more leaders in our team. We've launched a program for 80 leaders in our team to really go to the next level. So that's an area. We've grown our leadership team to 20 people from 10 people. So to be able to also build that whole sort of leadership thought process is an area we are investing in, creating our sort of physical space, which is helping build that sort of credibility from an organization to an institution as well, and really be able to do playful, innovative, playful stuff as well. So invest more in, how would you able to disseminate research, which is not in reports, but say interactive experiences that could help drive home the point of the research that we are trying to do, and so on. So yeah, I think it's a combination of, I would say, strategy, innovation, leadership, culture, and communication, and yeah, that's sort of at this stage. We are going through a strategy refresh as well, so we'll have more clarity on, exactly the kind of granularity in perhaps 3 to 4 months as well. So yeah, that's the current thought process. I think on the question related to diversity, equity, and inclusion, we had set a goal in 2018 that 50% of the people we work with would be women, and had called out a goal around that, but also around gender from the lens of being able to, again, for women, create a more safe learning environments in the educational institutions that we serve. So those were some of the goals, not exactly diversity, but it was, focused on gender and specifically women back 5 years back. We are trying to re-look at that goal today to mean that, can we include more vulnerable groups, whether that is, in the Indian context from a caste perspective or from other dimensions as well, LGBT QI is another area we are looking at. But these are complex issues, so we want to take it one step at a time rather than trying to have everything that sounds good to be a part of our intention, and not being able to do one thing well. So I think we're definitely going through that process again right now, that could look at beyond women, and yeah. The sorry, the third question was around the failure and the factors that contributed to that. Obviously, I did not at that point have this understanding of. I think I was definitely a someone who would bunk school, who would not go to class, always hang out in the playgrounds once in a while, not be very regular in school. So definitely there were some factors which were where I wasn't very engaged in my learning process, maybe because I wasn't understanding things that well in the classroom. I feel there could be some systemic barriers, maybe around teachers not necessarily giving me the attention that I needed. I would struggle with anger quite a bit as a young person growing up. So dealing with my anger, dealing with my emotions were struggles that I had. I can't think of systemic barriers, significant systemic barriers. I came from a family that was well educated, that had a stable income. I was not experiencing any sort of violence or any sort of adversity from the home environment. I would say yeah, I struggled a little bit in terms of establishing my identity with my friends, because of attitudes and just being able to feel accepted and so on. But I would say largely personal barriers than systemic, is my sense. But now that you ask me this question, I will reflect on it a little more, to also get in touch with that side. Although I think one important thing I learned through that experience was sort of the power of vulnerability and really experiencing what it means to be vulnerable, and feeling like that is a strength than that feeling like something I need to hide, and just being more open. I think it made me a learner for life, because I wasn't sort of anymore trying to pass exams or trying to feel like that's what I'm chasing. So I think that's what it got me in touch with, which I think has definitely helped me just become a better leader. I think that's been my sort of takeaway from that experience for sure.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us, Akash, because in preparing for this discussion with you, I went back and read a blog you and Bill did years ago, and talking about lifelong learning. And one thing we all have in common, right? We were all young or in our youth, and we had different experiences, and that so much informs, I think, also all of us, our passion for this. I see, Eric, you have your hand raised. And are there other questions for our last round before we wrap up our hour with Akash? Others? Okay. Oh, Joe too. Okay, so Eric, over to you, and Joe. And if there's time, I'll add one other little one. Go ahead, Eric.
Well, thank you so much for your story so far, and also being so open with us about your experiences in ninth grade. I couldn't help but notice that you had your AI assistant join our call today, and that's an area that a lot of IYF staff are focusing on exploring and building skills around at the moment. I'm curious, either for you personally or for the organization, if you could share a little bit about what AI has meant for you and how that might have changed your work in the past year.
I definitely think for me personally, definitely more easier summaries and of long reports, and not having to worry about reading 70-page documents. That's one scenario at a individual level that I feel AI has really made me, write emails and, give good summaries most immediately. I think on a more programmatic level, we've been working on chatbots to engage learners with limited internet connectivity, whether it is, things like career information, being able to find more relevant career information through integrating large language models in our chatbots is something that we've been experimenting with. So that's an ongoing experiment. I think the whole idea of Google Maps for career guidance and saying that, if this is the destination, can I get personalized support in the form of courses, in the form of internships, in the form of even the kind of local institutes that provide that course of my choice. So just being able to build a personalized learning engine, or being in the process of building this sort of Google Maps for career guidance in a simple sort of way is something that we've been able to make some progress on in the last year. I think translations is another area that we are looking at closely, because of also the ecosystem of Indian, entrepreneurs trying to build solutions that cater to such problems. So suddenly translations could become much easier, and you could query a search engine in your local language. It would translate it into English, get an answer to that query, and respond to you back in the local language. So it has multiple such, I think, powerful scenarios which we are exploring. And there's a lot more, I think, that the team is, I'm probably not doing justice to what I think all the gamut of things that the team is exploring right now. So it's definitely exploded. Our mind is sort of bending. We are, I think, enjoying that process right now.
Absolutely. Those are great examples as we're exploring too, and really trying to be at the forefront of this, because it's so important for young people. So we'll give the last word to our chair, Joe.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you again, Akash. Akash, I found this session extremely valuable, and it's interesting to me that you are dealing with a lot of the same issues that we are trying to deal with, in particular around AI. The specific question I'd like to ask you is, what was the most helpful aspect of your relationship with IYF as you built your organization, and are there opportunities for ongoing collaboration between our organizations? For example, when we were talking about AI, there's a lot of work that we're doing in that area. Could we pool resources and maybe leverage our respective resources better than we are able to now? How would you see that? And those are my two questions.
Sure. No, thank you. I think those are great questions. And I think the one thing I would say in terms of what was the most useful thing you said about IYF's influence.
The relationship in getting you going and getting you started and since.
Yeah. I definitely think it was, the mentoring, the mentorship part, but I would say that sort of having that sort of, like I mentioned earlier, I think the sort of this feeling that, you had a big brother who you could go back to, who you could fall back on. I definitely feel the safety that IYF meant that, we have IYF to go to for inspiration, for, ideas, but also for, models of how to structure your organization, how to think about communicating, how to think about building, a network. I would say there were all of these elements that made IYF feel like home in many ways, but also the sort of caring parent in some ways, till you felt like, you could also challenge the parent and not always feel like you have to listen to them as well. So I think it was a fairly um I would say a fairly defining relationship in our own ability to stand on our feet, feel confident, feel like, we could still try and go back to IYF, even though you knew that they may not, do anything because of the limitations that they have. But definitely felt safe and cared for and inspired, is how I would say that is IYF sort of left that impression. And
Before you
and
move
certainly,
on to the next question, Akash, I wonder if you could also reflect and tell us, what is it that IYF might have done differently to have improved the relationship and the outcomes that you've ultimately been able to achieve?
I definitely feel at that stage, amongst everything else, two things that could come to mind. One is, I think while IYF had a fairly strong focus on M&E in its own programming, I think passing that on to partners and having that as an important aspect, perhaps we did not pay attention to it as much as a early stage organization. So I would say monitoring and evaluation and bringing that to the DNA would have been definitely more helpful if we had that kind of support at an earlier stage than what we were able to bring and establish that culture. I would say, I mean, I was lucky to have, someone who culturally I was able to relate to at IYF, and sort of who was able to bridge the gap between, someone who was a US based organization with a local sort of partner, and sort of, I think the cultural uh, bridge, I would say, earlier for my first year to 2 years, I found it difficult. And I think over time that eased out for me. So I would say that sort of the cultural understanding that over time I got, maybe if I had it from the start, could have used the resources more effectively. Um, yeah, and for a network and for such a global footprint, I would say, the knowledge exchange, the knowledge building that IYF did globally, whether it was in the form of partner meetings or in the form of capturing knowledge, resources, etc. I think those were helpful, but I thought that had a lot more potential than we really made full use of. And I guess we are all trying to strike that delicate balance between, harvesting knowledge and learning and doing things that make an impact on the ground. And I guess that piece, I feel, could have been perhaps more amplified. So yeah.
And in the future, what would be the areas that you would consider prime for ongoing
Yeah,
collaboration?
I think definitely Eric and I have spoken recently for, a joint conference proposal, but also I think given the common areas of interest in digital, in innovation, I definitely feel that we could perhaps, put our heads together to maybe have a center for AI in workforce development, where we could perhaps do joint research, joint perhaps program designs, that we could test out in different countries together, put our heads together from these different perspectives. So maybe a joint center on AI and learning and AI and work could be a way for us to, that's one thought, but I think there could be multiple possibilities if we were to spend half a day together in a room. I'm sure there would be much more that could happen over that half a day or day.
Susan, let's get that done, shall we?
I love it. That's great. I'm ready, eager, and I know our team is as well. So wonderful. Well, a great way to close this session with you, Akash. I mean, thank you so much.